They say love in the underworld is a death sentence. Gabriel thought his biggest threat was the feds or a rival Chicago syndicate. He was wrong. The real danger was sleeping in his bed. All it took was one glowing notification to turn his empire to ashes. Listen closely. Gabriel Rossi did not believe in accidents. In his world, a misplaced comma on a shipping manifest could mean an FBI raid, and a lingering glance from a lieutenant could signal a looming assassination. As the undisputed head of the Rossi crime family, a syndicate that controlled the port of Chicago, 3 high-end casinos, and a vast network of legitimate real estate, Gabriel survived by being 10 steps ahead of everyone else. He was a man woven from paranoia and cold calculation. Until he met Sienna Brooks. Sienna was the anomaly in Gabriel's dark, meticulously controlled universe. She wasn't a mob daughter bred for a political marriage, nor was she a socialite addicted to the thrill of a dangerous man. Sienna was an art appraiser, a quiet, brilliant woman from Boston who spent her days authenticating Renaissance oils at the Sterling and Hayes Gallery in downtown Chicago. They had met at a charity gala at the Drake Hotel. Gabriel had attended to launder his public image. Sienna was there to catalogue an auction. She had spilled a flute of champagne on his $3,000 Tom Ford suit, looked him dead in his dark, terrifying eyes, and simply handed him a napkin, without a single tremble in her hand. From that moment, Gabriel was violently, irrevocably obsessed. Within 6 months, Sienna had moved into his 40-story penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan. Gabriel built a gilded cage for her, wrapping her in bespoke security, a private driver, and limitless wealth. He kept her entirely insulated from his business. She never saw the guns, the blood, or the men who disappeared in the dead of night. She was his sanctuary. When Gabriel returned home with the phantom scent of copper and gunpowder in his nose, Sienna would be there, wearing one of his oversized cashmere sweaters, reading a paperback, grounding him to humanity. But the last 3 weeks had been a nightmare. The Rossi family was bleeding. A shadow faction, completely unknown to the Chicago underworld, had begun surgically dismantling Gabriel's empire. They didn't have a name, but the streets whispered about a single shot caller they called the Architect. This ghost knew everything. They knew the exact routes of Gabriel's untraceable cash drops. They knew the access codes to a supposedly secure safe house in the Gold Coast, resulting in the deaths of 4 of Gabriel's best men. The worst blow had come just 48 hours ago. Matteo, Gabriel's most trusted enforcer and childhood friend, had barely survived a car bomb outside a discreet poker room on the west side. Gabriel was spiraling. His paranoia, usually a survival tool, had morphed into a suffocating poison. He trusted no one. He grounded his captains, locked down the city, and spent his nights pacing the hardwood floors of his penthouse, chain-smoking and staring out at the city lights, wondering which of his men was selling him to the slaughter. It was a Tuesday night, just past 2 a.m. Rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the master bedroom. Sienna had just slipped into the ensuite bathroom to take a shower, the sound of running water echoing softly through the heavy oak door. Gabriel sat on the edge of the California king bed, rubbing his exhausted eyes. He felt entirely unspooled. He reached for his glass of Macallan 25 on the nightstand, intending to down it and force himself to sleep. That was when the room briefly illuminated with a soft, synthetic glow. It was Sienna's phone, a sleek, rose-gold iPhone sitting on her side of the marble vanity. Gabriel paused. He never looked at her phone. In 2 years, he hadn't once breached her privacy. She was the only clean thing in his life. Interrogating her digital footprint felt like a desecration of the one sanctuary he had left. But tonight, his nerves were entirely frayed. The phone buzzed again. A short, sharp vibration. He glanced over. The screen was dark now. He tried to look away, to stare back into his amber scotch, but a dark, ugly voice in his head, the voice that kept him alive in the criminal underworld, whispered to him, "You're bleeding from the inside, Gabriel. Someone close is holding the knife." He set his glass down. He stood up, his bare feet silent on the Persian rug. He walked over to her side of the bed and looked down at the device. He tapped the screen. It illuminated, displaying a photo of the two of them in Tuscany last summer. But there was no notification banner, no text message, no missed call, just a blank lock screen. Gabriel frowned. He had distinctively heard it buzz twice, and he had seen the glow. He picked the phone up. It felt heavy, cold in his palm. He swiped up. The passcode prompt appeared. He knew her code. It was the day they met. An anniversary she found romantic, and he found conveniently easy to remember. He tapped the numbers in. 1014, 23. The phone unlocked, opening to her home screen. It was entirely normal. Pinterest, Instagram, a weather app, her emails. He checked her messages. Nothing but a group chat with her gallery co-workers about a delayed shipment from Rome and a text from her dry cleaner. Gabriel exhaled, feeling a sudden, crushing wave of guilt. "You're losing your mind," he thought. He was letting the stress of the syndicate war infect his home. He went to press the power button, to put the phone down and walk away. Then he noticed the battery icon in the top right corner. It wasn't green or white. It was a stark, unnatural shade of violet. Gabriel's blood ran cold. He wasn't a tech genius, but he employed men who were. His chief cybersecurity head, Silas, had once shown him a customized operating system used by high-tier cartel bosses and international espionage rings. It was a dual boot setup, a completely hidden, encrypted partition of the phone, disguised within the main hardware, accessible only through a highly specific backdoor sequence. Silas had told him, "If you ever see a purple battery indicator, boss, drop the phone and run. It means the ghost drive is actively receiving encrypted satellite data." Gabriel's breathing slowed. The sound of the shower running in the next room suddenly felt miles away, drowned out by the heavy, rhythmic thud of his own heartbeat. His hands, which had choked the life out of rival bosses without trembling, were suddenly shaking. He stared at the violet icon. He remembered Silas explaining how to crack a lazy setup. Swipe down the control center, hold the brightness slider, and double-tap the top left corner. It was a long shot. A customized device like this was usually military grade. Gabriel swiped down. He pressed the brightness slider. He double-tapped the corner. The screen glitched. The bright, cheerful wallpaper of Tuscany vanished, replaced by an abyssal, pitch-black screen. A single prompt appeared in stark white text. Enter biometric or override cipher. Gabriel was a dead man walking, and he knew it. But a flaw in the system, perhaps because the phone had just received an active, high-priority push notification, and Sienna hadn't locked the ghost drive down before showering, caused a secondary prompt to flicker. Session active. Bypass granted. The screen cleared. The interface that materialized on Sienna's phone was entirely alien. There were no colorful app icons, no standard menus. It was a terminal-style list of encrypted messaging channels and secure file vaults. Gabriel's thumb hovered over the screen. He felt a profound sense of vertigo, as if the floor of his luxury penthouse had suddenly dissolved into thin air. Every instinct screamed at him to put the device down, to pretend he hadn't seen it, to crawl into bed and wrap his arms around the woman he loved. But the monster inside him, the apex predator that ruled the Chicago underworld, took over. He opened the first application. It was an end-to-end encrypted messaging service called Ghostwire, a platform Gabriel knew was virtually impossible for even the NSA to crack. The chat log loaded. There were no names saved in the contacts, only alphanumeric strings. Gabriel clicked on the most recent thread, the one that had just pushed a notification through the partition. The sender's ID was OP-command. Gabriel read the text. OP-command. Target M survived the explosive device. Injuries severe but non-lethal. He is currently being moved to the private clinic in Evanston. Security is heavy. Advise on secondary protocol. Gabriel stopped breathing. Target Mon Mateo. The car bomb. He scrolled up, his vision blurring at the edges, his chest tightening as if wrapped in iron bands. Sienna, user 01. Unacceptable. I provided the exact coordinates of the poker room and the window of his departure. You had a 10-minute blind spot where Rossi's Overwatch was switching shifts. How did he survive? OP command. The explosive was delayed by a microsecond malfunction. Do we hit the clinic tonight? Sienna, user 01. Negative. Rossi is erratic. He will fortify the clinic. Let him drown in his paranoia for another 48 hours. I am feeding him false intel tomorrow morning regarding the Lucchese family to misdirect his retaliation. Stand by for the shipping manifests for the port of Miami. We are severing his southern supply line by Friday. Gabriel's stomach heaved. A wave of physical nausea washed over him so violently he had to lean against the mahogany bedpost to stay on his feet. He couldn't process the words on the screen. He was reading English, but his brain refused to translate the horror of their meaning. Sienna. His Sienna. The woman who cried when they watched tragic movies. The woman who spent weekends volunteering at the animal shelter in Lincoln Park. The woman who, just 3 hours ago, had kissed his forehead and told him he was working too hard. She wasn't just leaking information. She wasn't a hostage forced into compliance. She was the architect. She was the phantom dismantling his empire piece by bloody piece. Gabriel's thumb moved mechanically, scrolling further back through the months of encrypted logs. It was a chronicle of absolute devastation. He saw the exact messages where she authorized the hit on his 4 men in the Gold Coast. He saw financial blueprints where she methodically drained his offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, routing the money through untraceable cryptocurrency mixers to fund a rival cartel operating out of Europe. He clicked on another folder titled Assets_Compromised. Inside was a dossier. He opened it. It was a complete psychological profile of him. Gabriel Rossi. High emotional dependency. Crippling fear of betrayal stemming from paternal abandonment. Easily manipulated through acts of domestic normalcy. Blind spot. Intimate partners. She had studied him like a laboratory animal. Every sweet word, every gentle touch, every vulnerable late-night conversation they had shared in this very bed had been calculated data collection. She had manufactured a perfect persona, the innocent art appraiser, to bypass the impenetrable walls of the Rossi syndicate. And he had held the door open for her. Gabriel looked at the date the profile was created. It was dated 3 weeks before they accidentally met at the charity gala. A sharp, agonizing sound ripped from Gabriel's throat, a half-choked gasp, half-snarl. He squeezed the phone so hard the metal chassis groaned. The betrayal was so absolute, so flawlessly executed, that it felt like a physical bullet tearing through his lungs. He backed away from the bed, his eyes wide, wild, and utterly devoid of the calculated calm that made him a feared boss. He bumped into the nightstand. His heavy crystal glass of Macallan toppled over, shattering against the hardwood floor with a sharp, violent crash. Amber liquid and jagged glass exploded across the rug. The sound of the shower abruptly stopped. The heavy silence that followed was suffocating. Gabriel stood frozen in the center of the bedroom, the glowing screen of the compromised phone illuminating the raw, feral horror etched into his face. The bathroom door handle clicked. "Gabriel," Sienna's voice called out, soft, slightly muffled, laced with that perfect, practiced tone of innocent concern. "Honey, did you drop something? Are you okay?" Gabriel didn't answer. He couldn't. His vocal cords felt paralyzed. He stared at the bathroom door as it slowly swung open. Sienna stepped into the bedroom. Steam billowed out behind her, carrying the scent of lavender and vanilla, the scent he associated with absolute safety. She was wrapped in a plush, white silk robe, her dark hair damp and clinging to her collarbones. Her face was flushed from the heat of the water, her eyes wide and deeply sympathetic as she looked at the shattered glass on the floor. "Oh, sweetheart," she murmured, stepping carefully around the shards. She looked up at him, her expression melting into a mask of tender worry. "You're so exhausted. Your hands are shaking. Let me clean this up and you need to get into bed." She took 2 steps toward him, reaching her delicate hand out to touch his chest. Gabriel moved with terrifying, explosive speed. Before her fingers could brush his shirt, he closed the distance between them. He didn't strike her, but his hand shot out, his long fingers wrapping around her throat, not tight enough to crush her windpipe, but firm enough to freeze her entirely in place. Sienna gasped, her eyes flying wide in genuine shock. For the first time in 2 years, the flawless mask slipped. Gabriel stepped forward, forcing her backward, until her spine slammed against the cold, floor-to-ceiling glass of the penthouse window. Below them, the glittering skyline of Chicago stretched out in oblivious silence. The storm raged outside, but it was nothing compared to the apocalyptic fury radiating from Gabriel's eyes. He held her pinned against the glass with his left hand. With his right, he slowly raised her rose-gold phone. The screen was still brightly displaying the encrypted chat logs discussing the assassination of his best friend. He turned the screen so it faced her. Sienna's eyes darted to the glowing device. For a fraction of a second, the innocent, terrified art appraiser vanished. The warmth drained from her face, her pupils dilated, and something cold, ancient, and utterly ruthless flashed in her eyes. It was the look of an apex predator realizing the trap had finally snapped shut. Gabriel leaned in, his face inches from hers. The agonizing betrayal in his chest had crystallized into pure, lethal ice. "Tell me, architect," Gabriel whispered, his voice a low, gravelly rasp that vibrated with a promise of absolute violence. "How exactly did you plan on killing me?" The silence in the penthouse was absolute, broken only by the violent driving rain battering the floor-to-ceiling glass of the Michigan Avenue high-rise. Gabriel's hand remained clamped around Sienna's throat, pressing her against the cold pane. He expected tears. He expected her to beg, to spin a frantic web of lies, to use the soft, trembling voice that had anchored his soul for the past 2 years. Instead, Sienna's chest hitched, and a sound vibrated from her chest. She was laughing. It was a dark, hollow sound that made the blood in Gabriel's veins turn to ice. The terrified art appraiser from Boston melted away entirely. Her posture shifted. The fabricated vulnerability evaporated, replaced by the rigid, calculated stillness of a trained operative. She reached up, wrapping her small, damp hands around Gabriel's thick wrist. She didn't try to pry his fingers away. She just held his pulse, staring into his furious, devastated eyes with a look of absolute, terrifying calm. "You were never supposed to look at the phone, Gabriel," she whispered. Her voice was different now. The warm, lilting cadence was gone, replaced by a flat, aristocratic Bostonian accent. Your psychological profile dictated a 98% probability that you would never breach my privacy. You always prided yourself on being a gentleman in your own home. Gabriel tightened his grip slightly, his jaw clenching so hard, a muscle ticked in his cheek. "Who are you?" he snarled, the words tearing from his throat. "Who the hell is sleeping in my bed?" Sienna's lips curled into a razor-thin smile. "My name is Caterina Vitiello. Does that ring a bell, or do you leave the bookkeeping of the families you slaughter to your accountants?" Gabriel's breath hitched. The name hit him like a physical blow to the sternum. Vitiello. 7 years ago, the Rossi Syndicate had expanded their eastern seaboard operations. A mid-level Boston faction had refused to yield the shipping lanes out of the Massachusetts Bay. Gabriel's father, the previous Don, had ordered a surgical strike. They hadn't just killed the head of the family, Dominic Vitiello. They had firebombed his estate in Brookline. The official police report stated there were no survivors. "You're a ghost," Gabriel breathed, the pieces of the nightmare rapidly snapping into place. "Dominic's youngest daughter. You were supposedly in the house." "I was at a debate tournament at Cambridge," she corrected, her eyes flashing with a sudden, localized inferno of hatred. "I came home to ash and dental records. The FBI task force out of the Roosevelt Roadfield office didn't care. The local police were on your father's payroll. So, I realized that to destroy a monster, you can't use the law. You have to become a better, smarter monster." Gabriel stared at her. The woman he had bought a 3-carat diamond ring for just last week, the woman who knew how he liked his coffee, and who stroked his hair when he had night terrors. It had all been a meticulously crafted infiltration, years of planning, changing her identity, burying her past, embedding herself in the Chicago art scene, calculating the exact trajectory to cross his path at the Drake Hotel. "You poisoned my crew," Gabriel said, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "You fed Mateo to a car bomb. You leaked my Miami roots. I should snap your neck right here and throw you through this glass to the pavement." "Do it!" Caterina challenged, her chin tilting up, exposing her throat entirely to his grip. There was no fear in her eyes, only a fatalistic defiance. "Snap it. But you and I both know you're a tactician, Gabriel. You don't make emotional moves. That's why I chose to dismantle your finances first." She leaned in slightly, the scent of vanilla and lavender now feeling like toxic gas in his lungs. "If my heart stops beating, a biometric failsafe triggers on a server cluster in Geneva. Every ledger, every encrypted offshore account, the names of every judge on your payroll, and the exact GPS coordinates of the bodies buried under the Southside development projects get broadcasted to the Department of Justice, Interpol, and the heads of the Genovese and Lucchese families. By sunrise, the feds will freeze your assets, and the 5 families will put a $50 million bounty on your head." Gabriel froze. The apex predator was suddenly caught in a steel trap of his own making. He was the undisputed king of Chicago, but she had systematically rigged his entire castle with dynamite, and she was holding the detonator in her own chest. "You spent 2 years in my bed," Gabriel rasped, the betrayal finally bleeding through his anger, a raw, agonizing wound opening in his chest. 2 years playing the perfect innocent civilian. How did you stand it? How did you let me touch you? For a fraction of a second, the cold, dead-eyed assassin faltered. The mask slipped, and Gabriel saw a flicker of genuine, agonizing conflict in her eyes. Her breathing hitched, and her grip on his wrist tightened. "That was the flaw in the design," she whispered, her voice cracking just a fraction. "My objective was to study you, to map your weaknesses. I didn't plan on realizing that the monster who inherited the Rossi Empire was just a broken man trying to survive a life he didn't ask for. I didn't plan on... She stopped, swallowing hard, refusing to finish the sentence. You didn't plan on what? Gabriel demanded, stepping closer, the heat of his body pressing against hers, the proximity electric and toxic. Say it. I didn't plan on falling in love with my target, Katerina admitted, a single tear breaking free and tracing a hot, wet path down her cheek. I had 100 chances to kill you in your sleep, Gabriel. 100. A kitchen knife, a lethal dose of fentanyl in your Macallan. But I couldn't do it. So I tried to burn your empire to the ground instead, hoping you would just walk away when the money dried up. Gabriel's mind was spinning, a chaotic vortex of fury, heartbreak, and a dark, twisted realization. She loved him. She had destroyed his life's work, orchestrated the deaths of his men, and manipulated his every emotion. But she had spared his life because she loved him. It was the most beautiful, psychotic declaration of devotion he had ever heard, and in the twisted, blood-soaked logic of the underworld, it made perfect sense. Gabriel's hand slowly loosened around her throat. He didn't step back, but his fingers uncurled, sliding from her neck to cup her jaw. His thumb wiped away the single tear on her cheek. The gesture was tender, but his eyes remained pitch black, swimming with a dangerous, volatile energy. My father killed your family, Gabriel said, his voice a low, rhythmic hum against the storm outside. It was his order. I was a lieutenant in Chicago when it happened. I didn't pull the trigger, but my name signed the check that bought the gasoline. I know, Katerina whispered. I have the receipts. Matteo? Gabriel continued, his voice hardening again. Matteo drove the car that night in Brookline. That's why you targeted him with the bomb. Katerina's eyes widened slightly in surprise, but she nodded slowly. He was the last one alive from the hit squad. I needed him gone. Gabriel stared at her, the pieces of the bloody chessboard finally visible to him. He was losing his empire not to a rival cartel, but to a ghost demanding a blood debt. And the terrifying truth was, he understood it. If someone had taken his family, he would have burned the world to the ground too. He was looking at his own reflection, mirrored in the soul of the woman he loved. The feds are circling, Gabriel stated, shifting into pure, tactical survival mode. My capos are getting restless because of the financial drain. If they find out the architect is my fiancé, they won't just kill you, Katerina. They'll skin us both alive and hang us from the Navy pier. Then we let the fail-safe trigger, Katerina said, her voice dropping to a desperate whisper. We run, Gabriel. Tonight. I have a private jet fueled at O'Hare, registered under a shell corporation in Malta. We disappear. Let the feds dismantle the capos. Let the Rossi syndicate burn. It's built on blood anyway. We can start over. Gabriel looked out the window at the sprawling, glittering expanse of Chicago. It was his city. He had bled for it, killed for it, sacrificed his own soul to sit on its throne. The thought of walking away, of surrendering to the FBI and rival families, made his stomach churn with revulsion. He was a king. Kings do not flee in the night. He turned his gaze back to Katerina. She was magnificent, ruthless, brilliant, and entirely lethal. She wasn't an innocent civilian he needed to protect. She was an apex predator who had successfully infiltrated the most secure fortress in the country. A dark, terrifying smile slowly spread across Gabriel's face. It was the smile of the devil, realizing he had finally found his queen. No, Gabriel said softly. Katerina's face fell, bracing for the inevitable violence. "Gabriel." "We aren't running," Gabriel interrupted, his hands sliding down to grip her waist, pulling her flush against him. "You want to burn down the old Rossi syndicate? Fine. It was bloated and full of traitors anyway. But I am not surrendering my city, Katerina." He leaned down, his lips brushing against her ear, his breath hot against her skin. "Tomorrow morning, you are going to use your ghost drive. You are going to send a message to my 3 most problematic capos. You are going to lure them to the warehouse in the South Loop under the guise of an emergency summit with the architect." Katerina shivered, her hands clutching the lapels of his robe. "And then? And then we show up together," Gabriel whispered, the promise of violence heavy in the air. "We execute them. We consolidate the remaining loyalists. We restructure the entire syndicate. No more sloppy hits. No more vulnerabilities. You know every weakness in my organization because you exploited them. Now, you are going to fix them." Katerina pulled back slightly, searching his eyes, looking for the trap. "You're asking me to rule the syndicate with you? After I tried to destroy it?" "You didn't try to destroy it," Gabriel corrected, his eyes burning with a dark, obsessive fire. "You stress-tested it, and you proved you're the only person smart enough to stand beside me. The art appraiser is dead, Katerina. Sienna is dead. You are an underworld architect, and you belong to me. We are going to build an empire that no one can touch." He reached into the pocket of his trousers, which were draped over a nearby chair, and pulled out the velvet box containing the 3-carat diamond ring. He flipped it open. The gem caught the dim light, glittering like shattered glass. "My father took your family," Gabriel said, his voice dropping to a gravelly, inescapable vow. "So I am giving you mine. The Rossi name is yours. The city is yours. But if you ever lie to me again, if you ever try to run, I won't kill you, Katerina. I will lock you in this penthouse, and I will burn the rest of the world down until there is nowhere left for you to go." Katerina stared at the ring, then up at the monster she had fallen in love with. The storm raged outside, lightning flashing across the Chicago skyline, illuminating the two of them in stark, violent relief. The innocent life she had pretended to live was gone forever, but as she looked into Gabriel's eyes, she realized she didn't want it back. She craved the darkness just as much as he did. Slowly, deliberately, she extended her left hand. Gabriel slid the diamond onto her finger. It was a cold, heavy promise. A marriage forged in blood, betrayal, and an inescapable toxic obsession. He pulled her up into a bruising, desperate kiss, tasting the salt of her tears and the absolute, terrifying certainty of their shared damnation. The Rossi Empire was dead. Long live the king and his lethal, brilliant queen. Did Sienna's, or should we say Katerina's, ultimate betrayal leave you completely breathless? Love in the Mafia underworld is never just a fairy tale. It's a lethal game of chess, and tonight the queen took the king. If you loved this dark, twisted romance and want more intense Mafia stories, hit that like button, share with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment below. Would you have forgiven her?